Alright, welcome to my presentation about the basics of Python. So to start, what will I be speaking about today? Well, first I'll go into my big idea, then I'll give a brief description of Python, then Python versus Java, Python 2 versus Python 3. I'll give some programming examples of the basics of Python, and I will decide and I'll give my opinion on Java versus Python. I'll give some applications of Python in real life, and finally my conclusion. Alright, so first we'll go into my big idea. So I started off, obviously, with programming. Then I wanted to expand my scope beyond just Java. And then finally I came upon Python, and I wanted to know three things about Python. How does it compare to Java? How does it create its own unique identity that's separated maybe from other languages other than Java? And how can it ensure its relevance in the coming years? So first, a brief description of Python. So it was first released by Guido van Rossum in 1991. This is Guido. It was created with 5 core values. So beautiful is better than ugly, explicit is better than implicit, simple is better than complex, and complex is better than complicated, and finally, readability counts. And these 5 core values are very prevalent in the actual Python language. So it's been awarded the Programming Language of the Year twice, and it's a very popular and up-and-coming language. It may not be currently as big as Java, but definitely in the future, this language has tremendous potential. So now on to Python versus Java. So Python emphasizes readability. If we go back, this was one of the 5 core values of the founder. So one of the big differences between Python and Java is in Java, let's say to signal the start of a class or a method, you need to put a brace. In Python, you don't do that. Instead, it's all spacing. Spaces, the amount of space tells you whether or not, let's say, it's a class or a method, or if it's just a simple conditional statement. Python is also much more efficient in syntax. In Java, you have to put semicolons at the end of literally everything. In Python, it's just literally you write a line and that's good. Also, Python is something called duck-typed. And what duck-typed means essentially is there are no variable types in Python. So in Java, there are ints, booleans, things like that. But in Python, yes, those exist, but you do not have to explicitly tell the program or the PyCharm whether or not the variable is an integer or a string, because it finds that out by itself. And it's called duck-typed because the saying goes, if the animal quacks, or if the saying goes, if it talks and if it walks like a duck, then it is a duck. Essentially, duck-type means the computer only cares whether or not the particular operation can be done with the particular variable. And you do not have to explicitly tell the computer the variable type. And Python compiles line by line, which is a big difference from Java, given that Java recognizes runtime and compile time errors. But in Python, what happens is that it calculates errors, but if you run it, it calculates it line by line. So it evaluates line by line. So let's say you have a 1,000-line program. You may have an error at the very end, and it's somewhat annoying for errors. So now Python 2 versus Python 3. So Python 2 is what's called a legacy language, so it's the old version. And Python 3 is the present. It's the current and supported version. So the main difference is the print command. So the third point, as you can see, in Python 2 you would do quotations hello, but in Python 3 now you have to do brackets, quotations hello. And big difference is that Python 2, given that it was around for much longer for Python 3, it supports a tremendous amount of third-party libraries. So like commands that you can add to PyCharm, which is essentially the Python equivalent of Eclipse. And on the picture on the right, you can see the many third-party libraries. These are just a few. You can get literally thousands, while Python 3 doesn't have that many because it's a relatively new language. And Python 3 is the future. So Python 2 is going to be discontinued in around 2020. So after that, Python 3 will be the main and I guess only language in use. So now let's go into my programming examples. So on the picture on the left, in general, this is Hangman, and Hangman, I did this particular, I guess, game to demonstrate uses of a class, methods, conditional statements, and for loops, and do while loops and things like that. So on the left, we have def get word, and def definition is essentially a method in Python. As you can see, there is no like return type because it's implicit. You don't have to tell it because the language is duck typed. So I have an array of names. So the array is called words, as you can see right here. Then right here we have return random.choice words.upper. So random is a command. It's a kind of like math.ran in Java. And then .upper just turns all of the letters into uppercase, so capital letters. So then on the right here we have another method called check. And it takes in 3 variables: word, guesses, and guess. As you can see, there are no types. Like, you don't have to say that they're strings or ints. So guess, essentially what this point does, it takes the user's guess and it tells them down here in the conditional statements, if, elif, and else, whether or not these words here actually do contain the guess. And it counts the amount of guesses. So it starts at 0 and it increments by 1. And then we have the main method here. And then you see guessed is false, guesses is equal to none. And then, it tells them how many letters the word contains. And then we have a while loop here. And then, it asks for an input, and then depending on whether or not the actual letters in the word, it tells them wrong or correct. So now on to my second programming example based on objects and classes. So classes are very similar to Java. They're still called classes. So here we have an animal class. These are all private variables, so encapsulation's a bit different because you actually have to double underscore them. And then you have this constructor, which in Python it's called init, with 2 underscores before and after. So this is essentially just, setting up all these encapsulated variables. And then we have set name, get name. These are like accessors and like setters and stuff like that. And then here's an object, cat. Cat is an animal object, and it takes whiskers. Height is 33, weight is 10, and sound, well, it barks. And then we have a toString method down here. So my third programming example is graphics. So 2 things to keep in mind is, first of all, a very cool thing that Python has is a grid layout. So you can use this to plot points, and it can make, drawing a rectangle much easier. And there are an incredible amount of commands. I barely graze the surface. I mean, the amount of commands possible for graphics, it's just insane. I use something called tkinter, which is like a library with commands, but there are countless others. And in general, one thing I would say about graphics is that it's highly accessible. It's very easy to use. So, as you can see here, I drew, I guess this is like a star polygon kind of thing. So we can see the width, the height, and the color. This is just some weird green color that I found. It has its own number. And then you pack it, and then you have the points here. So essentially this is the grid layout. As you can see, the green outline is all based on all these points. and you can tell it what outline and what fill and how long you want it. And then you have to do this main loop so that the window actually stays up, because if not, what happens is that it runs through the loop very quickly and the window just never pops up. And then I drew a rectangle, and here you can see more clearly the actual grid layout. So I created rectangles, and I gave it coordinates, so 50, 20, 150, 80, 65, 35, 135, 65. Gave them fill, this green color, yellow, red, and the width, and then essentially you can give the coordinates here, 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 and then main loop. Alright, on to my fourth programming example about inheritance. So inheritance is essentially exactly the same as in Java. So for example, here we have a person and an employee class. So person is obviously the superclass and employee is the subclass. We have the constructors here, and they still use super in Python, so you can do super.init here for person, and then you can override the same. You just got to call it the same and put it in a different class, and then it uses polymorphism at runtime to determine which one to run. And then here's an example. So we have X is a person object and Y is an employee object. So it's essentially the exact same. So which one is better? So I personally like Java. I mean, that's probably because I've spent much more time with Java and I'm much more comfortable with it. I think generally one of the things that I liked about Java and I didn't really like about Python is actually declaring the variable type. I find for organizational purposes, Java is much easier because you can know whether or not it's a string if you're looking back. There's more structure in Java because Python's a bit abstract. It seems a bit abstract to me. Python, on the other hand, is much more file friendly. I made a file and it's 10 times easier and it's much shorter than in Java. I find PyCharm, the engine, it's much worse than Eclipse. I thought it's very difficult to start new projects, things like that. I find Eclipse is somewhat better. And one thing I did like, or I was torn about, was the indentation structure in Python. I think it's clean and easy to understand, but I think braces are also really good. So that's a either or. So some applications of Python. So it's used by the pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca, very big company, and it's used to narrow the field of good pharmaceutical products. And it's also used by Philips, like the electrics company, for semiconductor manufacturing and console control. And finally, it's used by Frequentis, which provides air traffic control for the FAA, or Federal Aviation Authority, for the interface. And here we have the interface on the right. So in conclusion, Python is an extremely exciting language. It is the future. I feel that if a couple things were worked on or changed, I would definitely like Python more. Plenty of applications in real life with Python. Python will keep and will start to be used much more. It's already used by massive companies like Philips and AstraZeneca. But I do feel at this current time that Java is still somewhat better. That may be a gross bias, but still that is my opinion. And questions, and here are my works cited. Thank you very much.